Okay, hello everybody. Okay, I hope this is working. It said the connection was good. This is my very first solo Biblio Talk. And Hannah is the one who usually does all of the tech part of our Biblio Talk. So hopefully this is working. And hopefully you're all hearing me and seeing me. And this actually works tonight. I did double check my internet connection, which is always the thing that I forget to do. And then it never works. But I did check it. I am connected to the correct network in my house. So hopefully there will be no glitches tonight, and this will all work out just fine for my very first solo Biblio Talk, which I'm very excited for. So Hannah and I were, chatting about what we're going to do in June, and she's got tons of plans. She's doing tons of stuff, and I actually have the month off. I finished my semester and I don't start up teaching again until midsummer. So I was like, I actually have some time, and I was really excited to put together some book lists. I haven't done that in a while, and I was really hankering to put some good ones together. So this week, and on Friday, I posted it to our blog. So you can absolutely go to www.thebookwar.com and check out this whole book list. But I'm just going to go through it. I read all these books and they're all amazing, and I was getting even more excited about it after I got them all from the library so that I could show them to you during this Biblio Talk. And I was getting more excited about them, and I'm like, maybe I'm going to reread half of these books. They're so good. So the whole idea of this particular book list that I put together is 8 nonfiction books about women, historical women, throughout time and all over the world, as it turned out, and they are written by women. So these are 8 nonfictions about women, written by women. And if you listen to our Biblio Talks, you will know that one of my pet peeves is when I pick up a nonfiction about a woman and it ends up being a book about the men around this particular woman. That makes me crazy. I understand why it's necessary sometimes, because there is an extreme dearth of information about a lot of women. But that is not the case with any of these ones that I'm going to share with you tonight that are on this book list. These are all solidly about the women that they claim to be about, and they are all written by female authors. So no further ado, we'll get started. These are in no particular order. They're in the order that they're stacked on my desk, and that the books look nice. So that's what order they're in. So starting off with my Kindle, because it's the tiniest one, we will start with Empress, The Astonishing Reign of Nur Jahan, and it is by Ruby Lal. This is on my Kindle. I don't have the paper copy of it. I'm in the middle of this one right now, actually, but I already know that it's fantastic. So Nur Jahan was an empress during the Mughal Empire, early 1600s. And she was very influential, very powerful. And her husband he got pretty ill towards the end of his reign. And so she really was able to really step up and issue edicts in her name. She was also sort of famous and a legend for being a huntress and killing tigers, right? Which of course was something that royalty did in Mughal India at the time. And she was amazing. I'd never heard of her. And so when I found this, I'm like, yes, I absolutely have to read this. So if you just want to learn, if you're not familiar with Indian history and Mughal history, definitely, if you're interested, pick it up. It's great. It's written really well. This is probably the one out of all of these that has the most sort of history about the people around her. The others are really pretty focused on the woman themselves. This one, there is a lot about the history that's going on around her as well, and her participation in that history. So if you're all interested in Mughal history at all, early 1600s, Empress, The Astonishing Reign of Nur Jahan by Ruby Lal is a great pick. I absolutely recommend it, 100%. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one, nonfiction written about a woman by a woman, is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, which many people may have heard of. This is written by Rebecca Skloot. It's been in the news a lot lately. If you're a book person, you've probably seen this one. We read it for my book club last year, and it might have been the year before. It doesn't really matter, but It was great. Everyone loved it. Every person in the book club. And this book club, I can tell you, we barely ever all agree on books. Like, no joke. We're all over the place almost every month, but everyone in the book club loved this book. So Henrietta Lacks lived mid 20th century, and her cells were special. I'm not even going to try to explain the science. They do a great job in the book, but I read it like 2 years ago, so I'm not even going to like go there or attempt it. But anyway, they're still using her cells for research today. They even used some of Henrietta Lacks's cells in COVID research. I heard that recently. So this book by Rebecca Skloot is fantastic. She does a really great job of being honest about what happened and how it happened. With Henrietta Lacks, and then the sacrifices that not only Henrietta Lacks made, but then that her family has continued to make. And she really brought that into the narrative, into the book, and into this very particular history, and how important Henrietta Lacks and her cells have been to science and medical research since the mid 20th century. So I highly recommend The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. Like I said, everyone in book club loved it. So I think it appeals to a very wide range of readers. Okay. The next one up, this I just finished. This one is called The Woman They Could Not Silence, The Shocking Story of a Woman Who Dared to Fight Back. And it is written by Kate Moore. I actually have 2 of her books on the list, so we'll get to her second one later. But I picked this one up because I had read the other one, and I knew how great a writer she was and how great a story she'd written in the other one. So I picked this one up when I was with Hannah. We were doing a book tour in Minneapolis this spring, and I picked this one up. I was not at all disappointed. It is fantastic. The main character is, let's see if I can remember her name, Elizabeth, what's her name? Packard. I looked at the back and cheated. Elizabeth Packard. She was placed into a mental asylum by her husband because they were not getting along. She was starting to have opinions of her own, disagreeing with her husband on things, and he wasn't having any of it, and he could legally put her into an insane asylum without any kind of repercussions. It was all completely legal for him to do this, even though she was not in any way, shape, or form actually insane. So this is her story about, being put in an asylum by her husband against her will, and then her experience in the asylum, and then how she was able to sort of fight back. And it's one of those books that like you're going through, and it's like all this bad stuff happening to her, all this bad stuff happening to her, all this bad stuff happening to her. But in the end, it's worth it, you guys. I promise you it's worth it. It's a really good story. And it's one of those stories you're like, holy cow, this is amazing. I didn't sort of realize how much power husbands had in legal power that husbands had over their wives and their wives' property and everything. And this was mid 19th century, so mid 1800s, right? And she was really pivotal in getting a lot of the laws passed that gave married women rights. Because before her, women just didn't have any rights. If you were married, you were your husband's. He had all the legal rights to everything. You were basically his property. So, an excellent book. This is a big one. It does take a little bit of a commitment to read it because it is a long one, but The Woman Who Could Not Be Silenced by Kate Moore is really fantastic, and I highly recommend it. All right, moving on. This one I read a couple years ago. This one is called The Five. The subtitle is The Untold Lives of the Women Killed by Jack the Ripper, and it is written by Haley Rubenhold. Okay, this book, I read it, and I immediately told Hannah, my sister, and my mom, I'm like, you guys have got to read this book. It's so good. And it is so good. Like I said, I picked these up from the library so that I could show them to you tonight on the Biblio Talk. And I picked this one up. I'm like, oh, I might have to read it again. It's just phenomenal. Haley Rubenhold does a brilliant job of centering these women in this narrative, and that they were so much more than just victims of Jack the Ripper, right? That's why the world knows their names, and that's the only identity that most people attribute to these women. But they were wives, they were mothers, they were sisters, they were friends, right? They had stories, they had lives that had nothing to do with Jack the Ripper until, sort of that fatal day, right? And Haley Rubenhold does a great job of centering their stories, and how they got to where they were when they encountered Jack the Ripper, and then, sort of came into the world of renown, but, just through the hymn, right? That's how everybody identifies these 5 women, but they were women in and of themselves, and they had lives, and people who loved them, and people that they loved. So it's great. It's really fantastic. She does a great job with the research. It's absolutely worth reading. It's not like super dense or super difficult to read, and the women are very intriguing, and Haley Rubenhold has a really great writing style. It keeps you engaged and keeps you want to continue, keep turning those pages and keep reading it. So highly recommend the 5, The Untold Lives of the Women Killed by Jack the Ripper. Okay, the next one up is the second book on this list of 8 that was written by Kate Moore. This is the first book by Kate Moore that I read. This is called the Radium Girls, the dark story of America's shining women. Okay, this is also phenomenal. Like, I read this one first of hers. I also told Hannah to read it, and I told my mom to read it, and they both loved it as well. I have recommended this book to so many people, I can't even tell you. Oh, and Hannah, actually, we were talking about this book the other day, and she said that her husband listened to it on Audible, and he really liked it as well. So this really appeals to a wide audience. And the Radium Girls, this is a story about the working class women working in dial factories in the early 20th century. So this is about World War I, right? So the 19-teens and 1920s are when these women are working in these dial factories. And they had just figured out that radium glows in the dark, right? So they're putting it on these dials, on these watches, right, to send overseas to the soldiers and so on and so forth. They're using it for other things too along the way, but that's one of the main things, so that they can see their watches in the dark, which, like, we just take that for granted now, right? But this was like new and exciting, and radium, which is radioactive, as we all know, allows, to see the dial in the dark, so that the soldiers could see their watches and see what time it was. So these women, these working class women, are working in these factories, and what they're doing is they're painting the dial faces with this radioactive paint. Okay, so they're being exposed to the fumes and to the paint all the time. But for anybody who's painted, even like as a little kid, how often did you stick the paintbrush in your mouth to get a nice fine point? Okay, think about that. With your watercolors and like all your paints, you do that all the time. These women were doing that, and they had radium-based paint going into their mouths. So they ended up with all of these health issues, right? And this book tells their stories, and it tells the stories of all the lawsuits that led to many of the laws enacted still today to safeguard against, hazardous workplace for workers. So workers' rights and employers being required and responsible for the health and well-being of their workers when they're at work. Because at this point, they weren't. These women had to fight tooth and nail to get any kind of compensation for their illnesses. And many of them, of course, died from radiation poisoning. It wreaked havoc on their bodies. And it is just a really, really well-researched and great book put together by Kate Moore about them and their struggles and their really pivotal role in safe workplace legislation. So The Radium Girls by Kate Moore, absolutely recommend it. It's fantastic. Okay. Changing gears just slightly, this one was actually recommended to me by one of my friends who does a ton of reading as well and has great taste in books. This is called Until I Am Free, and it's Fannie Lou Hamer's Enduring Message to America by Keisha N. Blaine. And I was lucky enough to actually hear Keisha N. Blaine speak at one of the Anti-Racist Book Fest online festivals after she had written this book. And this is amazing. This book centers not just Fannie Lou Hamer, but the role of women in the civil rights movement. Oftentimes, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, those particular men are really centered when we think about the civil rights movement in America in the 1960s. But women were pivotal. They were essential. And Fannie Lou Hamer in particular really went door to door. She was super active in sort of that grassroots activism, and getting people registered to vote. And she was out there with the people doing the work. And this book really centers her story, her history, and the really essential role of that sort of grassroots activism in the civil rights movement of the 1960s in America, but also in context, today, thinking about how we can get out there in these grassroots movements and, do the work. So highly, this one's a skinny one. So this one won't take you long to get through. Until I Am Free, Fannie Lou Hamer's Enduring Message to America by Keisha N. Blaine. Absolutely pick that one up. Okay, we're down to two left. The second to last one, again, these are in no particular order, don't forget that. This one is called Women in White Coats, How the First Women Doctors Changed the World of Medicine, and this is by Olivia Campbell, okay? This book spans the ocean a little bit. So this book centers women going to medical school in America, but also some women going to medical school in England and Scotland. So Scotland is sort of like known for, Edinburgh had the first medical school that women could go to, that they were actually enrolled in. It was kind of one of their big claims to fame. But that being said, as we all know, the first to do anything really, go through heck, to get it done. And these women endured so much, just to get through, to show the world that, hey, we can do this too, just as well, sometimes better than the men who are here, and the men who are fighting tooth and nail to keep us out. Olivia Campbell does a great job. The one thing that's frustrating about this book, and this isn't anybody's fault, is like all the women are named Elizabeth. I think there's at least 4 different Elizabeths, and Olivia Campbell does a great job of trying to differentiate them by calling them like different nicknames, right? Like throughout the book, but it's still like, it can be a little confusing. So just be like forewarned, to like try to remember and keep them straight in your head as you're going through, because they all have the same name. Which is no one's fault, right? That's nobody's fault. But it just so happened that a bunch of the women that were going to medical school that she's, profiling in this book had the same first name. So it does get a little frustrating. But Olivia Campbell really focuses not on the women as individuals necessarily, although that's obviously in there, but them as a community as well. Their friendships with each other, and how important that was for them as they're going through this process of trying to, become medical doctors at a time when it was very much like not a thing that women did. And they were facing misogyny and just everywhere, right? Before they get in, when they get in, while they're in. I mean, it's people trying to get them out, and not just from men either, right? Because this was very ingrained into most women as well, that like this was not, a career, right, that women could do. That women should be doing, right? It was very much looked down upon. So this is a great book about those women who we really owe so much to, especially all the women who are in the medical field today, who we owe our lives to on a daily basis when we go to the doctor and the hospital. So thank you to all the medical workers out there and the work that you do. This is absolutely worth picking up. Women in White Coats by Olivia Campbell. It's a great one. And last but not least, this is the last one on the list, number 8. This one is Daughters of the White Queen by Nancy Goldstone. And then the subtitle here, it's kind of long. So, Four Remarkable Sisters, The Crown of Bohemia, The Enduring Legacy of Mary, Queen of Scots. So this one, kind of obviously, is about the daughters of the Winter Queen, who happened to be the goddaughter of Queen Elizabeth I. Okay, so that's the time frame that we're looking at, just a little bit after Queen Elizabeth I. And these four women basically scattered across, Western Europe. And oftentimes when we think about, medieval royal women, we think about them as just, pawns for their fathers and their brothers and their uncles, to make, alliances to marry off the royal daughters, so to speak, to firm up alliances and, and that sort of thing. But these women, and many, many, many royal women, had lives of their own. They had ideas. They were intelligent. They were ambitious, right? They had creativity and interests of their own. And Nancy Goldstone does a really great job of giving these women their lives back, right? That it wasn't just, they weren't only pawns for their fathers and their brothers and their uncles, right? To marry off and solidify alliances and wage wars, and so on and so forth. That these women had lives. They had minds of their own and intellect of their own and creativity of their own, and how those attributes were expressed in their lives. Nancy Goldstone does a great job of getting to their stories and telling us their stories, and not just the stories of the men around them, which is one of my pet peeves. And as a person who studied history, and women's history in particular, I end up sort of doing that a lot, right? You pick up this book because you're like, oh, yes, I don't know anything about this woman. I've just heard about her in passing. So you pick up this history, this nonfiction history book, and it really gets frustrating because oftentimes, it really is a book about the men around her, the political war, the politics of the men around her, and it's not really her story. And to be fair, and I said at the beginning of this video too, but to be fair, that's oftentimes because we don't have a lot of historical documents, either from these women themselves or even written about them. Their stories were not deemed important to record, and so they weren't recorded very often. So I don't want you to think I'm trashing the authors of these nonfictions about these women that end up being about the men. It's not about that at all. It really is sadly just a great dearth in the amount of information available. And so that it sort of, if you're going to do that, it ends up unfortunately being a history of the people around, and then we just kind of have to use our own imaginations to create these stories of these women, and what their stories could have looked like, because we don't have their words and we don't have their histories as much, unfortunately. So, but these 8 are not like that. They are fantastic. If you want to learn a little bit more about them, I've got a little synopsis about each one of them on the book list, which is at www.thebookwar.com. So you can just go straight there. It's just go to the book list. It'll be the first one to pop up because I just published it this past week. And we haven't published any more since then. So it'll be right there. And you can take a look at the book, the cover, and a quick little synopsis. If you're like, oh, I remember one, but now I can't remember exactly what it was, just go and check it out. While you're there, definitely sign up for our newsletter if you're interested. We just send that out 4 times a year, and it's just to kind of let you know what we're up to, what's coming up. We just kind of do it seasonally. We're kind of seasonal readers too. So if you're interested in, staying on top of what we're doing, we'd love to have you sign up for our newsletter. You can do that right on our website, www.thebookwar.com. Also, obviously, you can like and follow us here on Instagram at The Book War 2 and on Facebook. And we do have a YouTube channel. So you can go there and check us out. Check out all of our past Biblio Talks. This one should be posted hopefully sooner rather than later. But again, Hannah will have to do it. Or maybe I'll have to figure out how to do it. I don't know. So hopefully it'll be on there sooner rather than later, and you can review it and watch it. Review it if you watched it again or watched it tonight and watch it for the first time. But you can go back and see all of our others as well. So I will wrap it up for the night. That was my first Biblio Talk by myself. So I hope you all are as excited about this book list as I am. Honestly, I think I'm going to reread at least 2 or 3 of these books because they're just that great. So absolutely pick one up, delve in, let us know If you like it, if you don't, because right, we all like different stuff, and that's cool. So definitely let us know your thoughts if you do read any of these books, and we look forward to hearing from you. Have a really good Sunday night, and we will chat later. Thanks, everybody.